Hello, everyone, and good morning on this beautiful Indian summer day in Plainfield. We welcome you to our roundtable discussion on Sunday, November 8th, 2020. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, in the United States of America. And thank you all for joining us today. We'll begin with the morning prayer.
I'm reading from Science and Health this morning. Let unselfishness, goodness, mercy, justice, health, holiness, love, the kingdom of heaven reign within us, and sin, disease, and death will diminish until they finally disappear. One infinite God, good, unifies men and nations, constitutes the brotherhood of man, ends wars, fulfills the scripture, love thy neighbor as thyself, annihilates pagan and Christian idolatry. Whatever is wrong in social, civil, criminal, political, and religious codes, equalizes the sexes, annuls the curse on man, and leaves nothing that can sin, suffer, be punished, or destroyed. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Mary Baker Eddy.
Wow, perfect.
Thank you.
That's right. Thank you. And the answer is in divine science. Politics does not have the answer. So thank you. That was beautiful. All right, and our watching point.
Watch number 198. Watch lest you adopt as your goal the effort to steer harmonious mortality into a divine and permanent anchorage. Such a thing can never be done, since mortality at best is but a fading dream. The only remedy and permanent anchorage is to get out of matter and mortality by destroying the belief that man was ever in it. Once Mrs. Eddy said, quote, "When you seem to be surrounded by materiality, rise above it, for you are never in it, and this will take you out of the belief." End quote.
Thank you. And before we go any further, Jeremy, I'd like that prayer on the carousel. I think we should do that every week. Just have it.
Thank you.
And thank you, Florence, for finding them, and beautiful prayers, and Karen too for the watching points. Okay, yes, comments on the watching point. Now, this is a big fallacy. The Christian Science is here to just to make our lives comfortable and matter. I mean, I think that's what I thought. So that's not what it's about. It's a spiritualization of mankind. It's a change of base. It's getting out of this materiality that will always put you to sleep, thus put you into the Adam dream, thus put you into not a good situation. It's only by rising above it and getting into the divine mind do we find true peace, harmony, health, all good things.
I've been, can you hear me? I was talking and I guess I didn't unmute myself.
Oh, yeah.
I was also, I'm working with my practitioner. I'm constantly reminded, and I'm now doing it so much more than I ever have, to remind myself I was never born into matter. And I mean, that is the crux of all our problems, is the belief that we were born into a mortal experience. And I'm just much more alert to keeping that uppermost in my thought, that I was never born into matter. I don't live in it. I'm not made up of it. I'm not going to die out of it. And anyway, I'm so grateful that I'm more alert to that.
Thank you. Kimball, in his teaching and addresses on page 130, he gives the treatment of pain. And he says that always goes back to pain. Pain is a belief that you were born into matter, life in matter. And we all want to get rid of pain, but do we all want to get rid of this false belief? Do we work daily about it, knowing we aren't born in matter and we're not going to die out of it, that we're God's image and likeness? So thank you.
And what are some other examples of appearing to be surrounded by matter or materialism? One is
body.
Yeah, one is thinking that we have a material body.
Body, yeah.
That's a tough one. That's a big one. There is one body, and it is spirit. And we are merely reflections of that body. That's pretty key.
I find when I think about that, I find that numbers really helps me to really put that in perspective, that a number 7, there's only one 7. You can have a million different, all kinds of 7s. But the idea of 7 is universal. All over, there's only one 7. So that helped me to see that's why we can say, or science says, there's one body. And individually expressed, but it's the same 7, it's the same body, it's the same. And that really helped me to bring that idea, helped me to understand why we can say, why there is just one body.
Thank you. That's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my Sunday school teacher teaching us that a table is not a table. And we were little kids sitting at a table and we're looking at her totally confused. And she said, there's only an idea of a table. But many, many years later, I was asked to design a table, and ego got involved and said, oh, I'm going to find a whole new way to make a table. And it became my table. And I found out that there's really only 2 things a table needs to do, which are basically stay level and not fall over. and it came right back down to the same idea, that it was an idea of a table that ultimately mattered. How that happened or what it looked like didn't matter. And all those years later, I finally understood what my Sunday school teacher was teaching us.
Thank you. Is that Kara?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Kara, did you want to speak about the social dilemma at all? I said,
sure.
Maybe.
Sure. I don't know how many people have seen the movie, The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary, but it's a very powerful documentary about basically the latest incarnation of essentially animal magnetism. And I wanted to offer up, and Jeremy can tell me how to put that word out there, maybe a group viewing and conversation about it, because I thought, if Mrs. Eddy was alive right now, which she is, but present and visible, she would be having us all work about this. It's very powerful and I think a very important thing that we should all be watching about regularly.
Well, and it's another example of being surrounded apparently by materialism, isn't it? The idea being that the media is controlled by people rather than by God.
And by what they call artificial intelligence, that's not a great euphemism for mortal mind. I don't know what is. And so, it's a wonderful opportunity for us all. We all sort of act shocked when we Google, I don't know, shoes, a particular brown shoes, and all of a sudden for the next 3 days, our feed is populated with brown shoes. But that's exactly how mortal mind works. we let something into our thought, and all of a sudden it's this disease or that politician. And so the whole thing is a metaphor. It's just writ large on the world in a way that I believe we all need to be praying about.
Exactly. And also making sure that we are awake to what is coming into our consciousness or trying to get into our consciousness, and rise above the materialism that is very aggressively trying to get into our consciousness. I mean, it's not even subtle anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we have mentioned this at the Roundtable. A group of us here in Plainfield watched it, and I know some of you out of town have as well, this social dilemma. It has been on Netflix. I guess it still is, although I wondered if it would stay there because it's not very complimentary of a lot of things. But it brings out the point. It is, honestly, it is a hypnosis machine, I call it. Hypnosis machine. It puts things out there, some absolute blatant lies. And what do they say? If you hear a lie enough times, you begin to believe in it, and it's a way of controlling the masses. And yes, we do have watches about it. We have had watches, and we will continue. And this is what it means. Christian Scientists, be a law to yourselves that mental malpractice cannot harm you either when asleep or when awake, which we are to be knowing often during the day. This is what that means. Because if you just go passively about your day, you will pick up all of this stuff that's total, as Kara said, animal magnetism, the human mind. So we must be awake, and that's what this lesson is about. And Lillian, you want to read the golden text? The subject is Adam and fallen man.
Wherefore he saith, Awake, thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light.
So our daily work is staying awake and certainly being alert to this. And we talk about it often, keeping TV off, all of these avenues of this hypnotic droning, telling you this, that, and the other. You're going to get the nameless nothing, or, you're going to lose your job, and then this and that, and over and over. And
so much fear.
And so much fear. We go around just like zombies, not thinking about what we're doing, saying, or whatever. It brought out clearly, this documentary, really, to watch your children, because that's how it starts early on, and they start watching it, and it's an addiction. It's an addiction. So very important. It's certainly the basis of Christian Science in many ways. You're either in the right mind, the divine mind, or you are under this hypnotic belief, the Adam dream. And it is a dream. So we stay lively and awake to it. And with that golden text, Karen, your forum comment.
Yes.
Go ahead about that.
Can you hear me? I'm not always sure you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I quoted Mrs. Eddy's the quote from Science and Health this week. The relations of God and man, divine principle and idea, are indestructible in science. And science knows no lapse from nor return to harmony, but holds the divine order or spiritual law in which God and all that he creates are perfect and eternal, to have remained unchanged in its eternal history. And then I gave the definition for indestructible: that cannot be destroyed, demolished, pulled down, annihilated. Lapse: to fall from a state of innocence, or from truth, faith, or perfection. This statement in this week's lesson is one of my favorites in our textbook. To me, it really sums up the basic teaching of Christian Science. It reminds me that there are no conditions under which man could ever be separated from God, his divine principle, that I can never be in a position of having to return to God, my source of harmony, health, and perfection. Man's perfection is unchanging and permanent, and this is the law of his being. It also reminds me that I'm never making any effort to recover something that I never lost in the first place. It is about waking up to the reality at hand, perfect God and perfect man. All suggestions to the contrary are lies about this statement and have no more reality than 2 + 2 = 5.
Thank you. So again, this awakening and staying awake to knowing what and who you are as God's child, not the Adam dream. And it was in the lesson in Science and Health, and I spoke to it on Wednesday where, and I didn't quote it exactly right, but from Mrs. Eddy, it is impossible that man should lose aught that is real when God is all and eternally his. And you can stay with that. You can't lose anything that is real, that is God-given, because God is ours always. It's only in belief in the Adam dream that we seem to lose things, whatever those things are. And when we awaken from that dream, we'll find out, just as this says, no lapse from or return to. We never did lose it, whether it's health or right sense of companionship, supply, all good things. They seem to come in material forms at this present time, but actually they are spiritual, given to us by God.
And that is why it is possible to awake.
Yeah. Like that.
It's possible because for this very reason, our relationship with God is permanent. So when any of us have ever fallen asleep, what is it that we awake to?
The truth of being.
Thank you. Yeah, we awake to righteousness, to the truth. We can be alert again if we ever stopped being alert. And it is the truth. It's not a matter of being awake to some human belief or being awake to some human theory. That is the mist that beclouds the truth.
It kind of makes me laugh thinking about how fearful and how much I was clinging to things before, worried about losing them. And now that they are gone, it's the best thing that ever happened that they're gone. So I'm really glad about that.
And we were taught here, all that you can ever lose is sin, disease, and death. It's all that you can lose, because that's not of God. And of course, we are glad to lose all that. But we might cling to it. Instead, he talks about clinging to our swaddling clothes, thinking that it's something of value, because it comes in various forms to maybe make us think that, but it's never of value, and we're always happy to get rid of it. And remember, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, in Eustace on page, bottom page 444, I like how he says, explaining these things that can come and go in our experience. What I see around me, all the things I am conscious of as persons, places, things, governments, minds, etc., are the varying ways in which consciousness or God appears to me, taking the language I can best understand, but always appearing to me in a perfect and unlimited manner. This language appears as effect. As other ideas like myself, it is never effect. It is the presence of God appearing to me, consciousness appearing to that which is conscious only of it. I really like that.
Very, very good. Very beautiful. Very true.
Right, and that is what it means to be awake, isn't it? To see everything around you as a manifestation of God. And anything that isn't right of God will stick out like a sore thumb, and you'll be able to detect it and destroy it in your own consciousness when you're awake.
When you're awake, and being awake has a little bit of a warfare to it, because animal magnetism wants to put you to sleep. And so when things seem too comfy, cozy, nice, and kumbaya, as I call it, watch out. Okay. We are constantly in a warfare because it's all around us, this belief of life and matter. And you in order to stay awake, you have to know it and you have to rebuke it in your own thought, and sometimes, in some ways, to a person or to a degree, to keep yourself awake and also to help that other person. This isn't all nicey nice and yeah, we'll all hold hands and no. Era wants you to go to sleep. That's why it's called a dream, an Adam dream. Gary was talking about it this morning to me. A war.
A warfare, yeah. Mrs. Eddy calls us to enlist, doesn't she? She talks about the warfare. And she talks about the need to be diligent and faithful in the warfare. So we can't...
Hello?
So we can't kid ourselves into thinking that it's okay to let down. Pray unceasingly. We talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, it was a Bible study. If anyone missed it, make sure you listen. Go ahead. Is that
help?
Yeah.
Florence?
Yeah, through Mrs. Eddy, she's given us some things to really emphasize and make that our foundation. God's laws. I am all. So we can't be anything but what He is. He says that if the belief is, you can't hear, then you have to know that the God of me hears perfectly, and there is nothing else to me. And also I feel that when she talks about the new tongue, when we take this journey, this truth of life, then we have to embrace the new tongue also. Like if you see a tree, is the idea of a tree. I kind of love how I think about my car now. My car is reliability and mobility. So all that helps us to keep awake to what's true, to have the right sense of body, the right sense of all that is around us. So it seems all material, but the right sense of it is what carries us on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone else?
I was going to share that about being awake. This quote that is about to keep your watch in that article. And it says that's not only mean to be awake and be working mentally. It means to do the work and succeed in breaking the mesmerism.
Thank you.
Yeah, that has blessed me a lot about being awake. Is in many ways we have to be.
That's right. You got to do it.
Yes.
No, thank you.
And also about the cars that, sure. And also about the cars that Florence just mentioned. Just a really wonderful thought is always to know that those are divine minds and divine love's cars are not ours. And it's been the best protection ever. And also to really know and use them for divine mind's work. Those are the two best protections with the cars, because I'm always on the road, always going to the different houseless camps and different things to pick up and drop off food and whatever it is always transportation. And it's just such a blessing to just make sure that we know they are God's cars and that we put them at God's service. And it's been a blessing just sharing that.
That's very beautiful, very true.
Good.
Thank you. Yes, and most of you know Ingrid helps the homeless, and she puts all that she does in service of God. That's why this idea of a selfish existence doesn't work in science. You can't put everything in. If you're putting everything in the service of God, you have to be in the service of God. And then you find great healing, great release. And all of these are beautiful examples of it.
Yeah, and that's a important point that she brought up. When we are awake to the truth is going to compel us to do a lot of stuff. We're going to be very, very active.
You won't feel all
Yes.
sleepy.
And this all those things I have to say is a blessing from this line from Mary Baker Eddy's writing that I got from the time I started studying the science of the Christ, that says, you have it as you live it. That was the main thing for me, to just really find out what was my work for Divine Mind and what Divine Lord wanted me to do, and then leave things to go and do it, and leave people. I have had to leave so many things, people, relationships, everything, to be able to do it. But it was always a blessing from that. You have it as you leave it, and it's a line that almost never appears anywhere, and she wrote it, and it's so amazing.
That is absolutely wonderful, and how true. And people who don't seem to have it don't seem to understand that point. It's only as you live it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just sit and read it and expect to get it. You've got to be living it as you are, in some unselfish way or form. It's not just sitting and reading and wanting your life to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That just digs deeper into this Adam dream. So yeah, that's a great. You have it as you live it. And on the forum, Joanne wrote about the antagonism. A man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish. This is, the human mind is at enmity with God. She brings that out. And so does Mrs. Eddy in the lesson, where she says, the science of the first record proves the falsity of the second. If one is true, the other is false, for they are antagonistic. And this is where the warfare is. You can't make peace with it. You cannot make peace with it. It's impossible. If you try, you'll get eaten alive. Stay awake. If you stay awake, you'll see it. You won't have to make peace with it. You'll see what's going on, and you'll be awake. I thought this was very helpful in Mrs. Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps, 308. We learn from Mrs. Eddy's history that the claim of animal magnetism first appeared to her as a blinding flash, as a power wielded by the enemy that, no matter how modest or set apart one might be, always stood ready to swallow the offspring of the woman, the spiritual development of her thought. Then, as her faith in God and the allness of his power became more and more real to her, she lost enough of her fear of this blinding flash to face it and dissect it, to learn of what it was composed. Hearing a mighty roar of evil, she began to trace it back to its origin. And instead of finding a mighty lion, she discovered a diminutive mouse squeaking through a megaphone.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, she commenced to learn something of the illusion called animal magnetism. In her later experiences, she never lost sight of the claim that is never recognized by the easygoing, placid human thought. When she analyzed the claim, however, by picking it to pieces, she discovered it to be an illusion, nothing claiming to be something, a bluff that is all front and no back. On the other hand, if it is unrecognized, it is one of the great deterrents to man's spiritual growth. That speaks to what Florence was talking about. The allness of God. It's nothing. If you fear it, you haven't dissected it to realize that it is nothing. Dissect it. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Challenge it and then dissect it, and you'll see it is this little mouse with a megaphone. It's a big nothing claiming to be something. But this is, you have it as you live it. You have to do this, and you have to be willing to.
There's that story in retrospection and introspection, where she talks about not wanting to write about it for the first edition, and the printer stopped printing her book, and she was upset about that, and she didn't want to write, and then she finally realized that this was, God was telling her to do it, so she wrote it, and she met without arranging that meeting, she met that printer at the train station because he was coming to tell her he was ready to go, and she had the pages for him to do.
That's right.
And I just love that.
That's right.
Thank you.
She faced it, wrote about it, and then that cleared the way.
It cleared the way. It always works. You're in that right mind, and all that you need comes to you. Things just work out. If you're not in that right mind in meeting opposition, then just sometimes we've been taught the greater the good, the greater the opposition, but you've got to make sure you've got a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other, and you'll find the path being made clear to you and how to move ahead. Now, Gary will read what Parthens wrote.
This is on the forum. This week's lesson reminds me of Numbers chapter 14, the two different kinds of men who spied out the promised land, and the two contradictory reports they gave concerning it. The 10 who gave an evil report represent the man of sense, or man of sin. They were so overwhelmed by sense testimony that they forgot who they really were. To them, it was as though the exodus from the land of bondage never happened. They simply canceled this story from their minds. Of the 12 spies, only 2 remembered who they were. 10 men saw themselves as grasshoppers and their enemies as giants in the land. Only 2 saw themselves as giants and their enemies as grasshoppers. The 2 reports are as far apart from one another as the 2 creation stories of Genesis chapters 1 and 2. The testimony of the 10 much parallels the evil report in the 2nd chapter of Genesis concerning the creation of man. Genesis 2 completely cancels what came before it and reads as though the first chapter never happened. In any trial, error's main aim is to make me forget who I truly am. When a problem arises in my life, am I judging it as a giant or as a grasshopper? God grant that I follow Joshua and Caleb, who rode so boldly, eagerly, and valiantly the mighty, unstoppable wave of omnipotence that swept away all things unlike itself as it swept them into the promised land.
This is why, again, to remember who and what you are. Don't forget it. And you can look around. You can see some people who are just terrified. As Craig said, they are absolutely terrified of this nameless nothing. They won't even leave their homes, or if they, they're just so worried. They have, as we say, drink the Kool-Aid. You just take that all in, and you do become terrified. You forget who and what you are, but some people don't even know who and what they are. That's why we are so grateful for this science and why we spread it out freely. As Florence says, so many people don't know who they are. Because if you know who you are, you will not be fearful of anything. And you can be respectful and kind and respectful of others' fears, but to get into it yourself, no. As a scientist, years ago, Mr. Evans told me this: if you're a Christian Scientist, you have nothing to be afraid of. And at that point, I was afraid of everything. So I realized I wasn't really a Christian Scientist, and I had to find out what that meant and what it is. Part of it is, thou shalt have no other gods before me.
I think the Bible verse, he that is in me is greater than he that is in the world, also is helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And perfect love casteth out fear. Perfect love. That's a love that doesn't sit around and think, but it actually gets out and does.
That's it. You are it as you live it. Yeah.
And where does this animal magnetism, this fear and stuff come from? There went up a mist from the earth.
Yes.
What's the mist all about?
It's nothingness. I mean, the mist is a mystification. There's really no explanation. It's just nothing. It comes from nothing.
Yeah, but it's very real to a lot of people.
Yes.
Right?
Feeling separate from God, life separate from God.
It's a
Not
fog.
mine.
Yeah, which
Fooling.
hides what was real.
It's all those false material beliefs, human theories that befog your thinking, that would try to hide reality. It tries to mimic the truth. Sometimes it's subtle and it fools a lot of people. Sometimes it's not so subtle, but it still fools a lot of people. And where does this mist take place?
And
Thought.
In God.
In our own consciousness. We either allow the mist to occupy our consciousness, or we see it for what it is, and and if we are awake enough to the truth, we will see it for what it is. That is the correct thinking in Christian Science. Sorry, go ahead.
I've always loved this story. There's a person having a nightmare, and in this nightmare, they're being chased by a horrible monster. And so they're trying to outrun this monster, and they're running and running. And every time they look back, the monster gets bigger and scarier, and they're running and running. And finally, they turn down into one of those, movie dark alleys that ends with, walls on all sides. And they turn around to face this monster, and it's now ginormous. And they're shaking and quaking in their boots, and they say to the monster, what are you going to do to me? And the monster looks at them and says, I don't know. It's your nightmare. And what I love about that is the reminder that it is all in thought. And what do we have to do? Wake up to the fact that the nightmare isn't and never was real.
Yeah, and let's not forget, whether it's small or big, like Eustace says, from a scratch to an earthquake, it's all still animal magnetism.
Yeah.
Because it can fool us. If it's something small, okay, but it piles. No, small or big, if it's discordant, God didn't give it, it's not here.
Thank you.
And it's also why we need to focus on the present moment, watch our thinking at this moment, because this is how Era works with the future and the scenarios and, what's going to happen. That's how the monster gains. Tomorrow is going to be worse, and I'm going to this and that, and you just start, But yeah, this is your dream, isn't it? That Mrs. Evans used to tell us that story too. This is your dream, isn't it? So what are you shaping your dream to do? What do you think tomorrow's going to be? That's why you have to be so careful when you say, I'm not going to be able to do this tomorrow because of this, that, and the next thing. Or you're creating mortal laws for yourself. Stop it. Did God say it? And if God didn't say it, it's not being said. Stop that negative scenario, and then that monster can't do anything to you. Project good. Trust God.
And then be careful what you listen to or watch.
Because
because there's a lot out there that's going to tell you how horrible things are.
And how horrible tomorrow will be.
Florence's prayer talked about how Christian Science annuls a curse on man. That other stuff doubles down on that curse. Really want you to believe that curse.
Yes, you believe the curse, terrible curse. So thank you, Kara. And also to finish that first, the social dilemma. So if anyone wants to get together and watch it, you can, I guess, let Jeremy know, and Jeremy can.
I have no idea how to do that.
Okay. Well, it goes back to Kara then.
Okay, I'll reach out to Jeremy. I know how to hold a group party, but I also wanted to say about the movie that one of the things that it says is, everybody from any angle is talking about how horrible the divisiveness is, making divisiveness a reality.
Yes.
And the movie says very clearly that the divisiveness was created by artificial intelligence,
Yes.
which is.
Well, and Mrs. Eddy warns us, doesn't she? That wicked minds are always at work. They are at work. So
Only one in yes,
whatever they can, and it's up to us to recognize them for what they are and not be influenced by them.
I wanted to share about two things. One was that, we say when we are given a job, there's always a position. But I always tie to that yes, that may be true, and it's usually true, but we also have the power of God behind us when we're given a higher thing, a bigger job, whatever it is. And it's been a blessing just to tie those things, because we always say the one, but we have to really remember that the power of God is also holding us and sustaining us, even if there's a position. That's just a big blessing. And also that we know this when you were talking about the big things or the small is anyway error, and we do know that there's no like a small error and big error. Like in medical terms, they talk about like a cold is a small sickness, but a cancer is a big sickness, or whatever, because it's all in matter. We know anything that is about amounts and pounds or whatever, it is all about matter. But in the spiritual, there's no big or the small. And it was really nice to just be reminded of that. Thank you for all your blessings.
Thank you, Ingrid. Now, with Parthens, he talks about error's main aim is to make me forget who I truly am. So Linda spoke about that very well on the forum.
I love the line in our lesson from Leviticus 19:2. Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord, your God, am holy. And I think I put that in Google, and this person had written a list of I am verses, and she said this is who God says he is, and it got me very inspired to put together my own list. And I love Bicknell Young. He has let the treatment give the treatment. The treatment is God, I am. And I know there's other articles on our website. If you search I am, one by Mrs. Evans about using treatment for I am, and it's just very powerful. And it helped me because this week when things got tricky all around the country, I found that affirming that I am helped me, and I just had a list. I don't know if you want.
Well, yeah, the point being, and Bicknell Young has written an article, I Am That I Am, that's wonderful to think about, because this is how you keep in the right mind and stay out of the Adam dream. And we have had this before for a watch message, but it's on page 48 of Watches, Prayers, and Arguments, where Mrs. Eddy says, just go alone and close your eyes, and in the depths of your own consciousness, say over and over again, I am, I am, I am. Your whole being will be filled with a sense of the power to overcome, the power to accomplish, the power to do all things. And then, I am because thou art. Mind is, I am. I am what thou art. Mind is, I am. I am where thou art. Mind is, I am. I am one with thee, mind. O thou infinite I am. I am good. I am well. I am abundantly satisfied. I am holy. I am free. I am because thou art. Mind is I am. I am spoken upward towards the good, the true, is sure to outpicture invisible good in success, in happiness, in abundance.
On
It's
page
powerful.
51, the blue book also.
Okay, it's on page 48 of Watches, Prayers, and Arguments, of my book anyway. So 51.
No, this collector and blue book is. I said it's on 51.
Yes. So there are different ways to find it. Thank you. But it is a powerful statement. She says, do it often. Go alone. Go over this. And this is how you outpicture that monster that's telling you all these other things. And this is, as Ingrid said, this is the living of it, not just, thinking about it. But you do it until you become these things. And you replace all the negative, fearful thoughts with the true thoughts. But it always has to have God in it. If there's no God, if it's godless, then this isn't New Age. This is the truth. That's very, very important. So thank you, Linda. That was a good, important forum. And you can read all the things that she writes about. I am the mighty God, the Alpha and Omega, the God of Abraham, the Lord that healeth thee, that bringeth you out of the land of Egypt. That's the land of slavery. The Lord who rescued you. I am thy shield. I am thy judge, thy lawgiver, the king. Those are all the things that God is. It's wonderful. And I love in the lesson where Mrs. Eddy says the divine mind that made man maintains his own image and likeness. And again, that definition of maintain. All these things God does for you. To hold, preserve, keep in a perpetual state or condition, which is the image and likeness of him. To sustain, not to suffer or to decline. To maintain the digestive powers of the stomach. To maintain character, reputation. To defend, to vindicate, to justify. That's what God does for you. And also that the blood, heart, lungs, brain, etc. have nothing to do with life God. So don't look there. The less you think about it, the better you are. I used to, oh my gosh, I had to take anatomy. I was thinking about that the other day. I finally I used my Christian Science exemption because, dissecting things did not appeal to me very much. The less we think of it, the better we are. You're a spiritual idea, and God gives you all that you need to function. All the functions of the real man are governed by the divine mind. That's all you need to know about any of your functions. God governs them.
Mm-hmm. So to let you know of the medical system.
Yes, and I was going to say, since the first time that you read dissecting, let's just really do this loving thing, because they do that dissecting of frogs and all this stuff from so early that it already alters our pure thinking about animals. And this is a really important thing, because it's done to all of the kids in the school, and tell them it's okay that we're killing all these frogs, because you get to see what is inside a frog.
I know, I remember that. That's true. Yuck. No, wrong.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is like, one of the first unloving things that we teach all of the children. We all can pray for that, please.
Yes. All of this, as Florence originally read about the one God who unifies nations, God will sweep up all the injustices that have gone on for so many years. And in that one commandment, as we live it daily in our own lives, it's very powerful.
Yes, and in our own plates, let's remember this. That's where it starts, right there in our own place, in our own homes. This is something that we really need to pray about. Even if with all the great, amazing work that Mary Baker Eddy did, but it didn't get to this. And I think it's our work. I really believe it's our work to do that.
Yes, there's progress is being made, the leaven of truth working. We're going to end now because time has come. Thank you all for your wonderful comments, and Gary's going to end with.
But I think most of you recognize that we are in a battle right now, and our Constitution, our laws are under attack, and it's not something that we can be turn a blinded eye to. Something that we need to be very alert to, and pray about. So we're reading from Miscellaneous Writings, page 176. Mrs. Eddy's extemporaneous remarks on the Sunday service of July 4th, which applies to today, even though it's not July 4th. The great theme, so deeply and solemnly expounded by the preacher, has been exemplified in all ages, but chiefly in the great crises of nations or of the human race. It is then that supreme devotion to principle has especially been called for and manifested. It is then that we learn a little more of the nothingness of evil and more of the divine energies of good, and strive valiantly for the liberty of the sons of God. The day we celebrate reminds us of the heroes and heroines who counted not their own lives dear to them when they sought the New England shores, not as the flying nor as conquerors, but steadfast in faith and love to build upon the rock of Christ, the true idea of God, the supremacy of spirit, and the nothingness of matter. When first the pilgrims planted their feet on Plymouth Rock, frozen ritual and creed should forever have melted away the fire of love which came down from heaven. The pilgrims came to establish a nation in true freedom, in the rights of conscience. But what of ourselves and our times and obligations? Are we duly aware of our own great opportunities and responsibilities? Are we prepared to meet and improve them, to act up to the acme of divine energy wherewith we are armored? Never was there a more solemn and imperious call than God makes to us all, right here, for fervent devotion and an absolute consecration to the greatest and holiest of all causes. The hour is come. The great battle of Armageddon is upon us. The powers of evil are leagued together in secret conspiracy against the Lord and against his Christ, as expressed and operative in Christian science. Large numbers, in desperate malice, are engaged day and night in organizing action against us. Their feeling and purpose are deadly, and they have sworn enmity against the lives of our standard bearers. What will you do about it? Will you be equally in earnest for the truth? Will you doff your lavender kid zeal and become real and consecrated warriors? Will you give yourselves wholly and irrevocably to the great work of establishing the truth, the gospel, and the science which are necessary to the salvation of the world from error, sin, disease, and death? Answer at once and practically, and answer aright. Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.